Hi everyone, and welcome back to Health Kick with Dr. K. I've got my co-host today, Samalwe, joining us. So we're going to be talking today about hydrotherapy, and for those that are joining on Instagram, Facebook, or on evomm3.com, welcome. So what I like to do usually with my co-host, this is the first time Samalwe's been joining today, so I just like to throw over the questions first to them before they ask me all the questions. So I'm going to be just asking you if you've ever heard of hydrotherapy before, or have you tried it?
I've never heard of it, or not even tried about it.
Okay,
Yeah.
So a whole new topic to explore.
Yes.
Very good. Okay, so hence the research before coming on and talking today about hydrotherapy then.
Yes.
Okay. Do you have any burning questions before we jump into like what it is, what it means, all that stuff?
I think I might have the questions after
you get some info first.
Yes.
Okay. Alrighty, good. So hydrotherapy in this case, when we're talking about it from the naturopath perspective, is that we're using water or water elements as healing properties. So a lot of people have popularized the polar dip. Maybe you've heard of that. That is part of hydrotherapy. So cold immersion, so putting your whole body in a cold, very cold plunge. So the polar dip is one way. Sauna is another way, using that, heat and humidity as part of that. If you've ever heard of the acronym RICE, so putting ice on your ankle, like after you sprained it or something like that, which we'll actually get to a bit later, but that's the RICE acronym has actually fallen out of favor from the guy who invented it. But we'll talk about that. The main thing that I love about hydrotherapy, though, is that you can get a whole host of health benefits at home. You don't need anyone else to, help you with it. You can just organize yourself at home, get your water set up, your heat, your cold, and away you go. So I think for some of you who have joined before and talked about contrast showers, I've mentioned those before. And I've probably talked about it like 3 times now because of how beneficial contrast showers are. So alternating the hot and the cold in the shower has immense immune boosting effects, as well as right now, like for example, I have two patients right now that they cannot get acclimated to the heat. So as soon as summer hits, like they need the AC, they can't go outside, they feel dizzy, they feel sick outside. So it's like they have like a really fast onset heat stroke that gets them. And we've tried everything. We've tried, giving them more water. We've tried electrolytes. We've tried, increasing their carb and protein intake. We've tried a bunch of things. And then I was finally like, you know what, let's just do the simple thing. Let's just try the contrast showers for a couple of weeks where it's, not a big commitment. Let's just see how you feel. And both of these people that just, again, that extreme impact of the heat are now able to, go from their home to their car, from their car to work without feeling like they're going to pass out as they get to the door. And that's just with 2 weeks. So imagine a month, imagine, a whole year, imagine all of that, the benefits that they can get, because now their body is able to tolerate heat and also cold, which is another benefit, just by doing those contrast showers. So how do you do that? At home, it's a 3-to-1 ratio, which is if your showers are shorter, then it would be, for example, 1 minute hot to 20 seconds cold, back and forth for 4 cycles. But if you're really averse to the cold, like I don't know about you, but I don't like anything cold. So as soon as I'm like, there's cold involved, I don't like this idea. You just work into it. You use hot water as hot as you can tolerate without burning. And then maybe you use like warm and then back and forth. And then eventually you work into like cool, cold, etc. Right? Yeah. So what do you think? Is that contrast showers? Have I convinced you? Is that something you might try?
I think I've actually tried it before.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh good.
Because like most of the times when I use water, I preferably start from hot, and then I just go ease my way down to the cold. But cold water, I don't tolerate it. I tolerate it as much as I don't know. But If I would say I'm like pretty much in between, like warm and like both of them is like
Yeah.
they're in the same circle. I don't prefer cold, I don't prefer hot. I'm just like in the middle.
You just want to be warm. That's it.
Yes, that's the main thing. Yeah.
Okay, good. Well, even there's honestly a ton of research about cold therapy. So putting, immersing yourself like from neck down into cold water or using cold air. So cryotherapy is the air treatment. There's a ton of research that says that even just 20 seconds is providing benefits in the long term. So 20 seconds 3 times a week of just cold has actually shown that, people are getting benefits in their immune health, in their mitochondrial biogeneration, which basically means that the little powerhouses of your cells are getting a boost and they're functioning better, which means that overall all your cells in your body are working optimally, right?
Right.
And 20 seconds is really not like a huge time commitment, especially if you don't like, cold and whatnot. So good. So at least you've experienced it. You've tried it out for yourself, even unknowing that that's what it was called.
Yeah.
So that's good. Good. Alrighty. So the other thing that I was going to talk about today is magic socks. So and a lot of people, like, again, they don't know what it's called, but they've tried this before. So what it is if you're starting to feel under the weather, you take cotton socks, and it has to be cotton so that they're breathable and it evaporates the water. You put them in cold water, you squeeze them out really, really well, put them on, and then you put wool socks over top, and then you go to sleep, right? And this is really good for fevers, really good for if you're just starting to feel not well, if you're feeling kind of like, there's something, like you're getting a little cold or something, right? Do it overnight, and they're called magic socks because by the time you wake up in the morning, they're dry. So that's why they're called magic socks. But what's happening is that the cold is like basically pulling, your body is heating up those socks. That's how they're drying, the heat from your blood flow constantly going. So the theory behind that is that you're getting immune boosting. It's helping to bring down a fever, like if somebody's got a really high fever and you're trying to bring it down. Naturally, that's one way to do it as well. So I don't know if you've heard of that before.
I've not heard of it.
Okay. Well, something to keep in mind, because as I say, it's a nice home treatment.
Yeah.
I've also actually used it on myself for a twisted ankle, because like I was mentioning before, before the acronym for anything like twisting your ankle, anything like that was rest, ice, compression, elevation. And then after a while, the guy that invented that, and I'm forgetting his name right now, but he said, actually, you know what? The ice and the compression are not a good idea, because what's happening is the cold is making it so that it feels better. The cold definitely makes it feel better, but it's actually slowing healing time. So that means that it's taking people longer to get better from a twisted ankle, even though temporarily they felt better, right? So the cold is actually pushing all the blood flow away, and the compression, same thing. So there's not a lot of blood flow happening there to help heal and bring more blood flow there. So ideally, when you twist your ankle, you still want to move it as much as you can, without hurting it, but just trying to keep it a little bit mobile. And then actually using the same idea as the contrast shower, only in, like, you might use a heating pad and maybe an ice pack or something. And the idea of putting heat on a twisted ankle is like not the best for people, because it's already hot, it's already swollen, it's hurting. So what you can do is actually put it either above and below the injury. So then you're still creating that pumping action, the heat bringing all the blood flow, and the cold pushing all the blood flow away, without putting it directly on the injury. So that also is another tip for any twisted ankles or any other injury that you have. Like it could be, you get a cut and you don't want to put it directly on the cut, but maybe above and below, you can try that. Same thing, same ratio, 3-to-1 ratio, 3 minutes hot, 1 minute cold, or if you don't have a lot of time, 1 minute hot, 20 seconds cold. So I will pause for a second because I talked a lot there, and I know you were taking it in.
Yes.
But I'll throw it over to you if you have any questions or anything kind of stuck out for you.
Okay. So my first question is, what is the purpose of the hydrotherapy?
So essentially what it is using one of our nature elements. So we have like, you know, earth, wind, fire, water, like all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
And naturopaths are all about that. We love using elements that we just have in nature. And water is one of those, and using its power, whether it be hot, cold, or warm, they all provide their different benefits to the body, and we like to harness that, especially because it's generally a low-cost option for people. Yeah.
And my second question is, what are the side effects, if there are?
Yeah, so definitely there are some cautions to be aware of when you are using heat and cold. So for example, with heat, there's definitely the possibility of burning. So you do have to be cautious with that. And then with the ice, generally, if somebody's using ice or very cold water, usually you want to put something over your skin first and then put the ice on top of that. So same thing, you can get ice burn, like freezer burn, I guess, like frostbite.
Yeah.
So same thing with that. You just want to be cautious that you're not getting one of those. So I always tell people just to your tolerance, right? So if somebody is like, you know, warm water to them feels very hot, let's just keep it there, right? And then there are other things to consider too, like if somebody is like just had a surgery, that is something where you wouldn't necessarily, you might still use a contrast shower, but you wouldn't use something like a full body immersion, especially if it was like a heart surgery or just like major abdominal surgery. Like those are times when you would want to probably wait a few weeks before you start getting into that. And with any of these too, like you ease into it. You know, like if you've never done a cold immersion before, you're not gonna like fill up the tub to your neck with ice and water and like get in. You know, like that would be very shocking to the system. You know, that's where you start with maybe your legs first, and then you work up to like mid-torso, and then you work up to that. Everything's a bit of a process, and the body does not really like surprises. So as much as you can kind of work your way into those things, the better.
Okay, so in terms of like mental health, what illness or like condition does it treat?
So that's a good question, because there is actually some new research with hydrotherapy and depression specifically. So what they're finding with the cryotherapy or the cold immersion therapy is that it's working on norepinephrine, which is it's a neurotransmitter, but also can act as a hormone in the body, and influences that mitochondrial biogenesis that I was talking about before. And that in turn has an effect on people's mood. So I guess the really simplified version of that is that they have a study where they were putting people in the cryotherapy chamber. So basically it's like up to your neck, it's cold air hitting you, very cold, for, I think it was 2 minutes, 3 times a week for 12 weeks. And the people that had that were scoring better with their mood, less depressive episodes, so there's some really compelling stuff that's coming out with cold therapy specifically. Yeah. How'd you know that?
No, it was just a question that I thought about that. Cool. Okay, if it deals with water, then like what could be like illness or like, especially because since you mentioned depression, like I feel like depression is like mostly the common thing that people deal with. So if like they try to like do something about it, then there's like a way for them to actually calm themselves, because with depression you turn out to be thinking about a lot of things.
Of course.
But then if you're like find something that could help you to ease out on what you usually think about the most, then that could definitely help you.
And I mean, there's nothing like freezing to like really distract you from everything else.
Right.
Like, yeah. So it's great, but it seems like it's a very good preventative thing as well. So you can use it acutely with people that are in a depressive episode, and also to prevent the severity that they've been dealing with. So as I say, and again, you don't necessarily need the cryotherapy chamber. You can use like the 20 seconds in the cold water at home, you know, a few times a week, just to keep on top of things, I guess. Yeah.
And my last question is, are there any like specific types of like the hydrotherapy?
So there's the sauna-based ones, because a lot of times, like especially with the Finnish sauna, you do the heat and then you do like a cold shower right after. There's the cryotherapy, which is the cold chamber. There's the full body immersions in like an ice bath. There's the contrast showers. There's using it like just contrast hot and cold, like on an injury or an area that's like hurting. There's steam inhalation. That's another form of hydrotherapy, which I actually didn't talk about yet. And Sitz Baths. So basically like you sit in a bucket of cold and hot water back and forth. So yeah, there's a lot.
I wonder how people do that, like sit in a bath full of like cold water, because I see some it's like cold water and then they add like ice on top of it. So it's like, how do you stay like minutes in the cold thing?
Yeah, and some people have trained themselves to do that for an hour. But as I say, that is something that they've worked up to, right? Like they've done, you know, minutes first and then etc. up until that time. But it's definitely a training that they've gone through. Yeah. But yeah, the one that I was mentioning was the steam inhalation. That one is also nice because generally people use that like if they've got sinus infection or they have a cold, or, you know, they feel congested or they have allergies. Those are generally the reasons that people use it. But it is nice, just like a relaxing thing, you know, like you can put some essential oils in there. If you like lavender, it's calming. If you like, you know, like more wake up and like more citrus kind of smells. If you're using it for decongestion, then, you know, more of the mint and the eucalyptus might be another option. But basically it's again, quite simple at home. You boil some water, you put a bowl in your sink, hopefully something that's like glass, that won't shatter when you pour the boiling water in. Get a towel and then pour in the water, do a few drops of essential oil, and then cover your head with the towel so that you've kind of made yourself into a tent. And then you just do some deep breathing for up to 10 minutes. And same thing with that. You can work your way up, because sometimes people, like especially if they have asthma or any sort of like fear of enclosed spaces, like you might have to work up to being in there for 10 minutes, but it is nice. And people tend to slow down and they breathe, right? Which part of, you know, mental health is actually taking a minute to breathe and relax, right? So that one's kind of nice. As a therapeutic for if you actually need it for decongestion, or if you want to just have kind of like a relaxing spa day for your face and like, you know, get the moisture there. Good, okay. And then the other one that I was going to talk about is the Sitz Baths. And that one, there are different reasons for that one, but commonly it would be like postpartum. So if anyone who's given birth and they have an I can never say this word, episiotomy? Episiotomy, yes. When you have a cut, or if there's any tearing, or if you have a fissure or any cysts or anything like that, those are reasons where you might do a Sitz Bath. So basically what you do is and this is, again, not the most convenient one because you need like 2 buckets to sit in. So if you have like those big Tupperware buckets that are kind of low that hopefully you can easily transfer from one to the other, you put hot water in one, cold in the other, and then same thing. It's always the same ratio of the 3 to 1. Sit in the hot and then go to the cold, back and forth, ending on cold. And what that's doing is helping the tissue to heal, bringing blood flow, and hopefully some pain relief as well, because anything in that area is going to be very sensitive. So, oh, and hemorrhoids as well too is another common reason for those, because those are not necessarily things that, unless you have surgery, sometimes you can't treat it. So again, just at home things that you can do to help. I didn't talk as much about the heat aspect, but heat in general can be nice for tight muscles. So anyone who's experiencing, you know, the office posture where their neck is like always crinkled up, or, you know, they sit for long hours, or they're standing for long hours, your muscles just get super tight. So putting some heat on there is quite nice. But generally the therapeutic amount of time is only 10 minutes. Whereas most people, they put the heat on there and it's on for like 3 hours. So again, it's one of those things where it feels better because the heat's on it and that's distracting you from the pain. But from, you know, the standpoint of like helping it to get better faster, you are much better off with the contrast, or just doing a therapeutic heat treatment, which is 10 minutes, and then letting it come back to regular body temperature, and then 10 minutes again. So it generally works out to 10 minutes every hour, depending on the person and, you know, how hot their body is in general. Yeah, so those are kind of the main things I wanted to talk about as far as hydrotherapy, how it's used. I think I explained how it's used, but just to reiterate, 3-to-1 ratio, you want 4 cycles. So if you're using 3 minutes of hot, 1 minute cold, that's 1 cycle, so that's 4 minutes. And then you would do that for 3 more times. So the total time would be 16-minute treatment. So I can tell you instances where I've given this, like for example, I had one person that they pulled their groin. So it was very painful for them. We did some acupuncture, we did some laser, and then I told them that they would need to do this contrast hydrotherapy on their leg. So 3 minutes hot, 1 minute cold, back and forth. And generally you want to try to do it 2 to 3 times a day. Most people, you know, in the morning, hopefully either before they go to work or, you know, on their lunch break, and then at home when you're just sitting watching TV or just relaxing, those are good times to kind of fit it in. So that for sure, like I mentioned, the twisted ankle, the magic socks is quite good for that one. But if you can't tolerate anything, then as I say, heat above and below the injury. Yeah, those are definitely the main things. With the Sitz Baths, however, you can get away with doing that once a day. And that one, you have to be very cautious with how hot and how cold you're making it, just because the tissues are very thin and very sensitive. So even though your hand can tolerate, you know, that heat, you know, the buttocks and genitals definitely cannot tolerate being immersed in that heat for those periods of time. So just being mindful of those types of things. So Samalwe, anything today that you're hearing that you think you might experiment with yourself?
I would say the hydrotherapy. I feel like that's like the most common thing that I like do with myself, like with either the cold and the hot. Like the matter of time of where you have to do it at a certain time, especially if you're doing like a treatment, or like how many like minutes of each like you could do. And also for as far as for the magic socks, I feel like that's the new one that I've learned today. And I feel like if it's like something that I feel like, okay, like I could start like doing, like like you could buy them, right? Or like, is there any
for the socks?
Yeah, the socks.
Yeah, so that you just need like a generic cotton socks, nothing special.
Okay.
Just that they just have to be cotton, and then you need wool socks, because that's what's going to go over top of the cotton. But other than that, that's it. That's all. And then with the socks, you just want to make sure that you wring them out really well, so that they're not dripping or anything, and then put them on your feet, put the wool on, and then go to sleep. Yeah, it'll be a good experiment. You could tell your friends.
Maybe I would try it myself. I'll try it myself first and then see if it works. Then it would probably be something that I'll be doing all over and again. But like I would experience it myself, and then I'll also let others know that okay, there's this magic socks. There's just
Yeah, you can tell all your siblings. Be like, hey, listen, I know how to do a magic trick now. Yeah, good. But it's just, and that's the thing, we want it to be manageable for people to try at home, very easy. And as you said, like experimenting with yourself is the best way, because definitely all of these things I've tried, I've had my patients try. And as I say, I wouldn't recommend something that I haven't at least tried myself. And all of them have been very beneficial for either an injury that people have had, I've had. And as I say, definitely the contrast showers, as much as it's a hard sell for people, that one, I honestly can't stress enough how beneficial it is for just like basic immune boosting and, as I say, just people getting acclimated to the heat and cold, especially now because we're in this heat of 35 plus humidity that people just can't go outside, and then they just, their summer's over, right? So it's just a great way for people to get into that habit. And then as soon as winter hits, they don't feel like a shock. You know, their body is able to tolerate those switches back and forth. What I wanted to do actually is I wanted to briefly talk about our next topic before we wrap up this one. Our next topic is going to be women's health. So we're going to be talking about painful menstruation. We're going to be talking about menopause. I will briefly talk about andropause, which is, you know, the male version of menopause in theory. So we're going to talk about all of those. And then that will be August 26th. That will be the last Friday of next month. So maybe Samalwe will join us for that one, maybe.
Yes, especially because you mentioned the painful menstruation part. It's like, okay.
Oh, she's in. All right.
Yes, I'm in for that.
Good. So we'll be talking about, you know, home remedies that are going to be good for that, and just some basics, you know, like some basics of self-investigation that you can look into for yourself, or if you know somebody that needs the assistance as well. So that will be next topic. But as I say, hydrotherapy, highly, highly recommend trying it for yourself. It is accessible, hopefully, at home for you, so that you can just try different ways of helping yourself feel better. Some of the benefits that we talked about, you know, the depression aspect, we talked about, you know, the immune boosting. There's a ton of research on anti-aging. So all in all, just very much worth experimenting with and trying out for yourself. So thank you so much for Samalwe for joining us, and for all of you for tuning in. And as I say, next day we're talking about women's health. Thank you so much. And we hope to see you next time on Health Kick with Dr. K.